Like my wife.
Only wears sunglasses.
All right.
Harold says.
You know, you're sort of Zaphod.
Hello, everyone. Please be seated.
Either go big or go home.
This is a super big room.
It is.
Not many people. So do you think we can start?
Yeah, obviously we're going to, because if we don't, we're going to run out of time. We've got
Yeah.
a lot of content.
Hello, everyone. We are going to start. Please be seated. Okay. Firstly, welcome to the Opsawg and Opsawg meeting. Next. Oh, it's not. Okay. The note well, please make sure you understand those important legal issues. Basically, all your contributions to IETF need to follow the rules. And next. Oh, it doesn't work. Firstly, we come to the Opsawg meeting, and it's chaired by Tianran and Joe. The blue sheet is circulating. Please fill in the blue sheet so that we can get the room with right size next time. And before we really start, we need a JavaScriber. Is there any volunteer?
Jabber scribe, please. Who's on Jabber? We just need one. Okay, that'll work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Warren.
Yeah.
Well, actually, with minutes, we have the Etherpad up there. You see that? But what I heard in NetMod I really liked, or what maybe it was NetConf, these are all recorded and watchable. And I've had some luck with transcribing stuff, like auto transcription service that you just fix. So I find that if there is something that you want to record and make sure it gets called out, go to the Etherpad and please put it in the notes. Else, what we'll do is we'll transcribe this and we'll put minutes up based on that. Since it's almost next to impossible these days to find a minutes taker anyway, and you end up doing the same amount of work, I find, when doing when creating the minutes. But if there is something you want to add to notes, please do that. Yep, but you already did, Warren, so you can't no take backs.
Thank you. The working group status. Since last meeting, we published 2 RFCs from this working group. Congratulations to the authors and contributors. And please keep contributing to this working group. Now we have 3 working group documents. Firstly, the IPFix BGP community document. We finished the work and now it's in the RFC edit queue. So TACAX, there was quite a bit of dialogue on this while it was on the list. We've got it to it. There's actually a 13 version now that fixes a lot of serious ID NITs problems with it. I've completed a Shepherd write-up that you can go read. All of that is public, and I've kicked it up to the IESG. So I've been talking to the authors. They fixed some things. There may be a few outstanding small comments from someone on the list, but we'll get those sorted out.
It went through working group last call. It did pass that. We have people did reply that there were implementations. That is, vendors who implement TACAX servers and clients replied that those implementations correspond to the draft. That was all noted in the Shepherd write-up. So I'd like to see that progress. I'm not under any illusion that it will be drama-free from this point on, but it is progressing. Ignis.
Ignis Bogdanas. Then just a clarifying question. Are you talking that you will post 13 or that 13, will be addressed?
This slide is slightly out of date. 13 was posted. I did not want to send it to the IESG before the serious ID NITS problems were solved, so I had the authors fix those. And they did. 13 was published, and I completed the Shepherd write-up and posted and now sent it for publication.
Okay, that means I need to read the whole line because I saw the document coming in, but whether that was 13 or 12.
It should have been 13, and sorry, this is slightly out of date. This happened this week once the data tracker reopened.
Okay. And we also adopted a new document early this week. It's about the network telemetry framework. It's about the hot topic in industry and IETF. And later, the author will introduce the latest revision and conclude the comments from the adoption call. And is there any questions? Okay, then let's start the agenda.
Just real quick, any bashing of that agenda? No, great, fantastic.
Okay, the first one.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we all know that everybody is talking about telemetry. So our goal is to transfer this buzzword to some really meaningful terms in IETF. So we can use that to get the standard and technology development work here, and also help us to clarify many misunderstandings and to really learn what's the scope of network telemetry, what it is and what it isn't. We have already went through 7 major revisions for this draft, and on March 7th we start the formal request for adoption to the OPS AWG, and after 2 weeks, during the 2 weeks period, the majority of feedback are positive, and so the working group has concluded on March 11th, this Monday, and formally adopts this as a working group draft. So we haven't addressed the most recent suggestion comments from the email list. But before this conference, we already submit another major revision. Now it's version 02. In this revision, basically we clarify the definition of the network telemetry. And also we move the technical review and survey to the appendix. Because most of this technology and protocol covered are still in the draft state and not mature enough. So, but we'll keep this survey to help people understand what's our current state of art. But eventually, if we go to the stage of RFC publication, we'll remove those drafts which are not mature enough to be included. And in this new revision, we also clarify the relationship between the network telemetry and the network OEM. We also articulate the need to actually partition the telemetry to different network planes. We'll show why in some later slides. And we add another framework dimension, which is a data acquiring mechanism, to help us to further use another dimension to classify the existing technologies. And we also add the security discussion and some other discussions on network telemetry evolution. So first, the new dimension to classify the technologies. Basically, we have a query and a subscription to get the telemetry data. Query is just another name for the pull-based mechanism, and the subscription is another name for the push-based mechanism. And there are basically four types of data. The first one is a simple data, which can directly derived from the network device. And the second type is a custom data, which is a more complex data type, which can be aggregated from simple data or computed from simple data. So to support custom data, we will need some more complex mechanisms, such as programming and deploying the filters and some other ways to achieve that. And then another type is event trigger data. It's actually more complex data type. It's built on top of the custom data, but it's the data only acquired through some preset conditions. The condition can be a very simple filter, or it's a very complex, must be described with something like a finite state machine. And lastly, we have this streaming data type, which is the most, so basically it can be the time series or any periodically generated data. So we can see using the pull-based mechanism, we mostly just deal with the simple and the custom data. But with the push-based subscription, we'll get the event trigger data or the streaming data. So we will see in the network, we actually have a very different monitoring entity and objects, and we have very different data sources and different data export location. Therefore, we better to partition the techniques or the protocols into different planes. So in this framework, we partition it into 4 different planes: the management plane, control plane, data plane, and the external data. For the management plane, it mainly deals with network configuration or the operation status, and the data mainly exported from the main control board CPU. For the control plane, it deals with the PDU, the RIB, FIB. So all these are related to the control protocols. And the data will be exported from the main control board CPU, line card CPU, or even directly from the forwarding chip. And for the data plane, it mainly deals with user traffic. So in most cases, the data will be directly exported from the line card CPU or from the forwarding chip. And at last, we have the external data can be acquired from the terminals and the servers. It deals with social events and application information. So on the right side, we list some existing works for each plane telemetry. With this partition, we have this overall architecture. So on network side or device side, we have a 3 plane telemetry, and we also have this external data and event telemetry. All of them, each of these has its own interface to the network operation applications. So the main key message for this architecture is that we won't have a one-size-fits-all solution. But on the other hand, we need to avoid to have so many different interfaces. We like to consider about how we can consolidate and unified this interface to make it as simple as possible for the application to consume. For each plane, we can further vertically partition this, the telemetry into 5 unique components. So the first one is on the application side is doing the, we call that data analysis and storage. So it mainly provides the data requirements based on the application. And on the other side, when it gets the data, it will do the data sharing, distribution, and processing. And in the device side, the first component is data subscription, query, and configuration. It is about interface for data request and also the data model to define the data. And the third component is the data encode and export module. It's about the interface for telemetry data output. And below that is the data generating and the processing module. So it's mainly do the device side data preparation, how to generate data to satisfy the data request. And finally is the data source. It's just the raw data source also to identify where the data can be acquired. So the next step is first we thank all the constructive reviews and the comments from the working group email list. So many people have given a lot of useful suggestions to improve this this draft. So in the new revision, we will consider all of them and reflect these reviews in the next revision. We also thank many network operators and OTTs. They all provide their own requirements, and also they confirmed with us that this framework is actually very useful for them. And certainly, we welcome more reviews and feedbacks to help us to further improve this document. Thank you very much.
Questions? So I have a few. I don't want to monopolize too much of the time. I have a review. I'll send it out to the list more kind of a point by point. Did you attend today's tech talk at lunch with
Yes.
Benoit and Frank? So one of the things that resonated with me there is the intermingling of the different types of telemetry, as well as the need to intermingle the different SDOs, the different people working on this. So they had kind of the collaboration, the tools, and the framework. You have talked about how you've reached out to other operators and OTTs. I think it would be very useful to do the same across, to try and fill in the gaps where gaps exist in terms of telemetry with maybe other SDOs. And I would say that overall, and really try to figure out, like there are a few things in the draft where I think things just don't feel cohesive. Like you had that external box on your slide, and then you were also in the draft or in the document talking about environmental as a feed into that. And I would think that would be very core. And as Benoit and Frank had on the slides today, blending these forms of telemetry adds more value. And so I would like to see ways, and maybe as part of the framework, maybe even recommendations, and maybe I'm just speaking as a contributor at this point, recommendations on how I as a consumer might make better use of telemetry, or how I can up value the telemetry from just raw data. So I would say from a chair standpoint, I would love to see other SDOs participating in this and giving feedback. As a contributor, I'll have other reviews, but I think it's really around how do we get more value out of telemetry.
Yeah, good suggestion.
All
Okay, Robin from Huawei. I think this suggestion is very good. In fact, from our point of view, we know that is communicated with the China Standard Association and also JANOG. They also have Japan. They have their telemetry working group. So we also have this one. We also try to join this ONAG to discuss this one. We try to collect the more information, and later I would like to share this in community. Okay, thank you.
Great. Next, I think.
Nothing else? Thank you
Right,
much.
thank you.
And please, this is now a working group document. Please read this, comment on the list. Like I said, I would love to see more feedback on this in general, and I will. I'll put my money where my mouth is, and I'll post a review very soon. Next up, we have Mr. Kumari. You.
Whoa. There we go. Thanks, Joe.
Do you have the clicker? Do you leave? It's right here.
I should also figure out how much time I've got. 10 minutes, right?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. So this should hopefully be a bunch less than 10 minutes. The clicker even works. So first off, this is not really a new idea. It's been an idea that's been kicking around for a long time. And it's mainly optimized for simplicity. It's supposed to be simple to implement and simple to use. It's not supposed to be the sort of shiny whiz-all, solves all problems thing. It's supposed to be a tactical solution. Also, I'm using the Cisco auto install type feature just in examples, largely because it's something that everybody's already familiar with. Everybody knows it. This works with anything with a config, but again, using the Cisco auto config example throughout. Once again, it doesn't solve all use cases, just a common one. So what do I actually want this for? I would like to be able to buy a device and ship it off to an IXP or a POP or something and have somebody there just plug it in, connect it to my network, and have it boot, get its config, and start working. What I don't want to have to do, I don't want to have to ship a person there. I don't want to have to ship a thumb drive. I don't want to have to ship my config to the vendor and have them put it on the device and then ship the device. I would like to have smart hands plug it in, connect it to the network, and have it just work. The obvious answer here is, well, just use Cisco's auto install or something similar. It already exists. Unfortunately, no, I can't do that because I want secure device install. So a quick refresher on how auto install works, just so everybody knows what I'm talking about. This is the standard auto install type thing as implemented by Cisco and many, many, many other network vendors. The router starts up, it realizes it doesn't have a config, it does a DHCP discover, it gets an IP address, it gets the name of the next config file to download, next boot server, and it connects to that and it downloads the config file. And as you can see, the config file has all of my config stuff in it. Right, it's got all of my info. I mentioned here, I showed here using TFTP. Obviously, many people use HTTP, etc. But it's a general sort of well-known concept. So what's the issue with this? Well, an attacker can also come along, plug in, get an IP address via DHCP, learn what config file to download, grab the config file, suck it down and install it. And it contains my SNMP community and my TACAX key and my firewall config and all of that sort of stuff. That makes the attacker happy and it makes me sad. So what's the actual idea in this document? When the vendor makes a device, they make a key pair for it, or when it first boots, it generates its own key pair. A lot of devices already do this. Some of them have TPMs and stick the public and private key in there. Anyway, lots of devices already do this. The bit that changes here is the vendor will take the public key, they'll stuff it in a certificate, and then they'll publish it on a website somewhere, server.vendor.example.com, something like that. When I now order a device, I call up my vendor and I say, please ship me one of these. And they say, sure, give me your money. I give them my money, and they say, we're shipping you serial number 1234, or in this example, 4217. I take that serial number and then I go and fetch that certificate from their web server. This is just a web server somewhere. Anyone can go off and fetch that certificate. It's got a public key in it. It's a certificate. Anyone can grab it. What I do is I encrypt my config file to the key that's in the certificate. And then I just follow the normal auto install type stuff. I stick it on my TFTP server, FTP server, whatever. When the device boots, it does the normal sort of standard boot system. It realizes it doesn't have a config file. It goes off and downloads this config file. When it does that, it notices that the config file is basically just filled with garbage, right? It's a big blob of encrypted stuff. It has a look, it says, this doesn't look like a config file. And so it decrypts it with its private key. Only this device has its private key, so only it can decrypt it. And then it just carries on booting as normal. Here's the example again. The only thing that's changed here is the config file, is the stuff in red. The config file is now an encrypted config file. When the device downloads it, it figures out this doesn't look like a config, and it decrypts it and boots it. The attacker obviously can do the same thing. He can go off and grab the config file. He does not have the private key though, and so he can't do anything useful with it, other than kind of guess how big my config file is, which I don't really care about. This makes me happy, and it makes the attacker sad. So, some sort of obvious questions. Why not do draft IETF netconf zero touch? Honestly, netconf zero touch is better. However, it's a fairly heavyweight process, or a heavier weight process. It needs devices which actually understand netconf. It's going to be a while before that comes about. This is a simple, easy, tactical solution in the meantime, or at least I think it is. Why not Anima ACP and Bursky? That's even more complex, and it's going to be a long time before that happens. It also sort of involves changing the paradigm of how I run my network. Might be cool, long way out. All of the vendors, I'm sure, are saying, just buy my shiny new product, it'll do all this for you. Sorry, no, I don't want your shiny new product. It means I'll have to figure out how to integrate it and probably pay you for it. Another question I've heard, why not use the 802.1 AR IDEV ID? For those who don't know the 802.1 AR stuff, it's a new thing which allows the device to authenticate itself to the network. It's really cool. If your device has this and you have access to the certificate, you can just use that certificate. I mean, it's already generated security. In many cases, the device can't actually access the certificate, separate subject. Another question I hear many times is, once I've used this, can I delete the certificate or replace it with my own? I think that's an implementation decision. Personally, I wouldn't bother doing that. That way, if I ever sort of sell the device to someone, they can just reuse this to bootstrap. But implementation choice, whatever. And then the other obvious one is I don't actually put my config file on the TFTP server or FTP server or whatever. I put a little proto config on, and then I SSH in and update it to the real one. Yay, that's a really good idea. You should do that. You can use this to download the proto config, and now you have 2 layers of security. Is this actually simple? I think so. Here's a quick example done in, using OpenSSL. Make a config file or grab the certificate, make the config file, encrypt the config file. It ends up, does the laser pointer work? Yep, it ends up over there. You just stick that on your TFTP server, FTP server, whatever, and now you can use the auto boot stuff. And questions, because I'm sure we're running low on time. Basically, do people think this is worth doing, not worth the trouble?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Who's read this draft? Very few.
Who think it's the best thing ever? Yeah,
I liked it a lot.
More people who've read
it. Tim.
So, Tim Karinoki, I just have a question. I have no issue with what you're saying here. I'm just curious, why does this need standardization?
It doesn't that much. I want vendors to do it. There's not a huge amount that requires standardization here. So,
is this an informational RFC or?
Yeah, it was written as an informational.
Okay, all right. I'm just curious because I'm like going, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what's
like an obvious easy thing. Yeah,
it seems reasonable.
Yep, definitely informational, and I think it's useful for people to do it. Or BCP. We can fight about that later.
Yeah, or BCP, whatever. Okay.
Okay.
The corollary then is, what have you tested this on? What hardware have you tested this on?
So I did this by generating the certificate and stuff on a Linux workstation, and I tested it with Bash on a Linux workstation. Oh, actually, no, I made it work with a OpenWRT thing as well. But I mean, a lot of it was just tested. Yeah. Cool.
Bill Fenner, Arista Networks. We're definitely looking at what we can do in this direction. I don't know the details of if we can do exactly this, but I'll take it back and we'll look at it.
Woot. I mean, the main thing is if the config looks like it's crap, try decrypt it first. That's all you need. Anyone else?
So I have a question. What is your intention? You already mentioned to Tim that you want to make this informational. How, in terms of progressing the work, what is your
I would
thought?
like people to read it and provide feedback.
Okay.
Oh yeah, my co-author is Colin Doyle from Juniper.
Okay.
He's not here, unfortunately. Yeah, I'd like people to read it and provide feedback. And then if people think it's interesting and worthwhile, possibly adopted by Opsawg WG, that would be nice. But
so
hello.
Another question, Warren. Or that wasn't a question before. This is a question. What do you think about SSL and authenticating the server that you're downloading from? I mean, not TFTP, but if you're using HTTPS there.
Get it from any way that you can get the config file, sure. The issue with doing it with getting it over SSL is some people are going to want to do these on their own private network, and then your device needs to trust their certificate, which may or may not be signed.
Right.
But yeah, I see any way that you can get the config file, if you can get it securely, even better.
Hi, Laurent Chavalia. In one of the first slides, you mentioned other options such as netconf and Anima,
yes.
Brusky and Secure Bootstrap. You mentioned it's too complex, which I might agree with you, but my recollection is that in Anima they made quite, they look at different options before starting the work, and I think when the solution they come with is to cover different cases. And are you not oversimplifying some of the steps? That's why they came up with a more complex solution. And in your diagram, for instance, you fetch something from a server, but I think in Brusky it's covered that, you can impersonate the server also, which in your case might make the attacker happy again.
So yeah, what Anima is trying to do is a much, 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 much larger thing, right? They're trying to build an entire intent-based system, which requires a whole new control plane. This, I think, is simpler because it just does a tiny, small, narrow use case. And yes, that's true. An attacker who could sit over there and pretend to be my TFTP server, or wherever I fetch it from, could in fact serve me a bad config file. All that's happened then is the attacker has managed to put his config on my device, and he's stolen my device for all intents and purposes. My particular use case is mainly something like a POP or an internet exchange, where my main concern is smart hands basically stealing my config. I'm shipping the device to them. If they want to steal the router, they could put it in their truck and drive off with it. So yeah, a very different use case. Anima and netconf are much larger solutions. This is just targeted tactical thing.
Hello, Luis Contreras from Telefónica. One of the cases that I was considering when you were presenting this, and I think that you have answered partially to that now, is one of the things that we are facing is that overall in the outdoor equipment in some countries, we suffer that the equipment is stolen. So probably this mechanism could help somehow to also to ensure that the equipment is somehow used by another party, let's say, that is not the proper owner of this, could not work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would help with that as well, but I'll need to think about that some more.
Okay, so I would like to talk to you to see if this could be extended to that extent.
Yeah, in that case, ideally, I think you'd probably want to combine this with 802.1r if your device supports it. Very few do at the moment, I think. But yeah, we should chat more.
Okay, thank you.
And is that an Elliot?
Hi, Warren. So if I understand correctly, there's a moment in time where essentially you have a private key that can be TFTP'd. Is that correct?
No.
Then I misunderstand.
Nope,
So,
no worries.
so just time-wise, this might be best to go to the list. We are running over. If this is going to be a detailed back and forth, it might be worth taking that to the list, Elliot.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, next.
Careful, that's a big step. No, over there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bo, and I'm here to talk about the TACOS client young data model. And here is a little background about this draft. This draft is initially defines a young data model for TACOS client, TACOS Plus client configuration, and to allow the centralized authentication, authorization, and accounting. And in a last IETF meeting, we received the comment from the working group that the original system AAA model is also need to be extended to make the device management AAA complete, and therefore can support the full functionality of TACOS. So here are all the updates since last IETF meeting. Firstly, we changed this TACOS young structure to align with Radius client configuration. And secondly, we extend system user authentication to make the TACOS authentication method to be enabled on the system. And thirdly, we add the system user authorization and accounting method to support additional device management triple configuration. And so on the left-hand side, this is the original IETF system device management AAA related configuration part. And the right-hand side will be our intended to be intended configuration. That's the red highlighted blocks will be the extended configuration. That will be TACOS client and also authorization and accounting. And so this is overall TACOS client configuration and also the system AAA model looks like after the updates. And since we received a comment from Alan that he thinks right now the system AAA part module could be TACOS client specific. So we think the system AAA extension could be maybe be spaced out to be a separate draft. So that's an open issue for we like to hear from the working groups comments about this.
So I speaking as chair, I would tend to agree that so when I read this draft, and I do have a pointed review I'll send to the list, I thought it's good that you're extending the system, just like Radius is in there.
Yes.
But I didn't think it was needed to overload this draft with a generic AAA module. I thought it was good that you were augmenting and fitting into where system does, but it seemed kind of, I had to agree with Alan there, it seemed kind of odd to also then say we're going to do more of a broad AAA, because there are things to consider. Some of Alan's comments were network level authentication versus device administration.
Yes.
So I would agree that work should be broken out and perhaps moved more into more of a security.
Security.
Maybe just to get the right eyes to look at that. But certainly from what you were doing with TACX, I thought that looked right to me.
Okay. So our next step will be we like to hear more comments from the working group, and we hope there are more comments about whether is this useful. And so I think it's this draft fit the working group well. So we would like to ask for the working group adoption.
Who's read this draft or this document? Number of people. Number of people. I honestly, with the AAA in there, I don't think this revision is ready for adoption.
Yes.
I would like to see if you read this and you think it's sufficient to the working group, you think it's sufficient to configure TACX based on how you are using TACX for device administration. It would be good to send your comments to the list to make sure that it's covered correctly. I think ultimately you're right, it does fit. We're trying to get TACX as it's implemented, documented in this working group. But I think we need to be very specific about what this document is trying to do.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or comments here on this for those who have read it? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Can I have another one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's right. You have the next presentation.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay.
It's been a long week. I'm also in the NOC, so it's been a long 2 weeks, I guess.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Okay. This draft, here is a draft about the SD-WAN VPN service model delivering. And in last IETF meeting, we received several comments. One major comment is from Charles. He's representing the Metro Ethernet Forum. And he suggested us to look over the MEF's current SD-WAN service attributes draft specification and try to make alignment with this one and suggest us to do the overlap or misalignment work. So we read through the MEF's draft specification. And this figure is from the MEF's service orchestrator reference architecture. And since our draft is mainly designed for managed SD-WAN service model, so we think our draft and MEF's SD-WAN service attributes have a lot of in common. So then we reword this draft and make it more alignment with MEF's SD-WAN naming. And apart from that, we also received the comment that there's our draft is unclear about which interface that this service model could be fit into. And I just right in this figure, the red one, circle one, that could be the interface that the service model fitting, and that is a customer-facing interface. So it will not be used by the SD-WAN controller to directly configure the underlying SD-WAN devices, such as SD-WAN Edge or Gateway in this figure. And here is a map that we are doing the mapping between IETF SD-WAN VPN service models term and with the MEF's SD-WAN service term, since in IETF we already have the layer 2 VPN service model and layer 3 service model. We like to follow the IETF's service model terminology. So that's the reason we changed the MEF's SD-WAN service term to the IETF one. If someone have some comments about this, we'd like to hear from the working group. And basically, the SD-WAN VPN service model is quite similar right now, since we have the discussion with the Charles before this meeting. And here is a picture we borrowed from SD-WAN service attributes from MEF draft specification. Since SD-WAN has have some service characteristic quite different from layer 2 VPN and layer 3 VPN, since they have more application-aware policy service requirements. So we already reflect this configuration in our model. So here is the SD-WAN service model looks like. And this model has a similar YARN structure like the L2 VPN and layer 3 VPN, but the major difference is we add more application-aware policy parameters here. So we'd like to hear more comments about our this SD-WAN service model designing, and we also think this work because layer 2 VPN, layer 3 VPN, or before is also belongs to operation area. So we think this one can complement the L2, L3 VPN to this is because this is overlay based, CE based overlay VPN service. So we would also ask the working group adoption. So.
Okay, excuse me. Charles Eckel, and I did read the draft, and we discussed the terms, and I've been active. Actually, I co-chair the activity group in MEF that's working on SD-WAN. And so I think that the timing is fantastic because the work in MEF is ongoing. The work here is also going on. So I think there's really opportunity for us to align this. And so I really am very supportive of this effort. I also appreciate the changes that have been made so far. I think now when you read the draft, it's obvious that it's trying to serve the purpose of both SDOs. That's fantastic. I do think we have a bit more work to do in that in MEF, the whole the focus on applications and their flows is very prevalent. Now it's prevalent in the models, but it doesn't really come across in the abstract or the introductory text of the draft. So I think that should be worked on.
Okay.
But I think we've made great progress on aligning the terminology, and I think we can continue to align it so that it fits both groups. So yeah, I think it's good work. Thanks for bringing it here.
Okay, thank you.
So Tim Karinoki, I do have a question. So
Okay.
it sounds like the MEF that isn't proceeding with the data model in this area. Is that
Yes.
Is that accurate? I'm sorry, I didn't know if you both are building data models that will have a showdown at the end here.
Yeah, which ones? Actually, so in MEF we had some, I think, attempts at building a data model for SD-WAN, just kind of to sanity check what we were defining to kind of see if it was complete. But I'd say the consensus within MEF is that the right place to define this Yang model would be the IETF.
Cool.
And so we'd really love to work with the IETF there.
Thank you.
Who else has read this this document? Quite About the same, maybe a little more than the TACAX draft. So it sounds to me, given that Charles was the one who spoke up, that maybe this is good. This is proceeding in the right direction. I haven't seen a lot of on-list comments around this. Maybe I missed some of them.
Okay.
I would like to see more before we call for adoption. It sounds like there might be some more work to be done. But it sounds like maybe this is the right place, and this work could. I like obviously the interaction between the SDOs there.
I have a question. It seems there's a similar work in RTG-WG, right? There's seems another SD-WAN related YAM model.
Yes.
What's
Actually,
the difference? So I have two questions. One is what's the difference? And the second is why these two models are posted to two different working groups.
Okay, here's our thought, because in last IETF, our AD Ignace gave us the comment because he thought that ONAC has the SD-WAN expertise to define the SD-WAN requirements, because that's an enterprise community so they have real SD-WAN requirements. So we reach out to the Steve Wood. He's representing the ONAC OSE, that's Open Service, Open SD-WAN Exchange working group. And actually, he made clear to me that to us that ONAC is only focused on enterprise-owned network, and our work is mainly about the managed service, SD-WAN service. That's from that the SD-WAN service is provided by service provider. So that's the main difference of these two work. But there and ONAC is also don't want to touch the single domain SD-WAN service configuration, because he thinks that's domain-specific SD-WAN controllers work, and they just want to focus on the inter-domain configuration. So, and the reason that service model is proposing RTGWG, since Steve feel that's the working group he's in, I think, 102 meeting, he made the presentation there, and the working group chair, the Jeff, welcomed him to propose the draft there. So that's the background of this, the work. So.
Doug Montgomery. So I thought the synergy between this effort and MEF sounded wonderful.
Okay.
What I'm wondering is there actually a joint commitment there to keep these things in lockstep, that if we propose adding something to this Yang model, we would expect the MEF service model to change accordingly? Or was this just sort of an opportunistic one-time meeting?
Yeah, actually, I forgot this as an open issue, because I think it's a quite good question. And I also talked with Steve. There's mainly have some, like, even this is like a one domain or inter-domain, maybe the application-based policy could be same. So in that way, some part of the work may need to be aligned together and be. I think we should also bring these requirements also to the MEF to impact their service modeling and to make this inter-domain, single domains work be coordinated. Can I respond to you?
Still a little bit unclear whether that's opportunistic and good people are trying to make the right thing happen, or it's an agreement between SDOs that this is how we're going to do this.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of any official interlock. I don't know, Charles, if you were going to add any color on that.
Yeah, I think there has been nothing official. There's not like a liaison or an agreement. What there was an agreement on was, let's meet here and try to hash some of this out.
Okay.
One of the promising things, though, I think, is that the MEF spec is it's something that's being done in phases, and the first phase, just because you want to get something out there, be more kind of agile, hasn't even been published yet, and we know there's going to be subsequent phases. So it's not like it's something that's locked down, and if we decide something here in the IETF that we wouldn't have the chance to reflect it there, because I think both things are moving in parallel. So I don't know about making any formal pledge. I haven't seen how those work in the past. I don't have any experience with that, but I would say on the part of the people who are involved in the work, they both want to see this happen and want it to be defined in IETF.
Okay. We can work on that. Okay.
Ignas Bagdonas. So one general comment. Yes, you described the situation pretty well on why this ended up in different working groups and why there's such a split. And I think that is probably the practical way forward. However, there's one concern with this. Now we have multiple groups, multiple interested groups trying to define a model for something which seems to be one common area. And it's a big question whether those solutions will eventually be, would use what, comparable or compatible. To me, there's no fundamental difference from a connectivity perspective whether we are talking about enterprise or the service provider. The line is quite blurred. Yes, there are different requirements for that. Okay. And maybe trying to separate that so strictly is not the right way forward. I don't have an answer for that as such. And all of this is more in a form of experimentation. So we have at least two other external entities which bring in requirements from their side. And as the, say, technology domain expertise is here in IETF, this is why this work is being done here.
Yeah, maybe, so Charles Eckel, one more thought that may be helpful here. If you look at the way these two different services are being defined, the one in the service provider space, and the other in more in enterprise, on the service provider, it's very important that while sure we know that underneath there are these underlay networks, the way the service is being described, it's from the point of view of the customer to the service provider. The customer is not going to do anything with the underlays, going to have really no insights to how the service provider is utilizing those. So it's a very high level interface where all the customer sees is the overlay and describes what they want it to do. I'm not that familiar with what's being defined in ONUG, but if you think about an ONUG, it's the customer operating the entire service, and I think it'd be absolutely necessary for them to understand the underlays and how to use them in order to do this. So I think it's going to have to be a much more detailed model in my mind for it to work, whereas the MEF one's purposely going to be much simpler.
Yeah, I will send the draft to you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. So I'm Ronnie Evan, and the document was written by people who listed there. So the document defines a young data model that can be used by a network operator to configure a VPN service that spans multiple administrative domains. The model is not a configuration model to be used directly on network element. This data model is already used in a service provider environment. That's why we are trying also to standardize it, and we have a place where it's being used, this architecture. The 0.1 version was presented in IETF 103, and the 0.2 was updated to reflect the comment that we had in the previous IETF, and 0.3 addressed comment from Adrian Farrell. The major changes are better text about the document motivation, use cases, and changes to the data model to align with L3SM and L2SM. Next slide will describe these changes. So about the service, one issue was how is the service model usage, and we see two ways by which it is being used. One way is the independent model, in which case it's the network orchestration uses the composed VPN model and translate it to segment VPN for each administrative domain. So in terms of the customer facing, in this case, he may use L3SM or L2SM, but the service orchestration, the network orchestration, will build the composed VPN information model. The other way is to have it used by the customer facing model as input to service orchestration layer that will translate to the composed VPN model. It's the other way around, which I described. The first one is okay. The major changes, other major changes, is that we emphasize that it is being used as a single service provider whose network is divided to multiple administrative domains. It may be used by multiple service providers based on peering agreement, but the current usage that we have is one service provider that has different administrative domain. He has a metro network and a core network, and they are managed different. Each one is its own administrative domain. And the requirement is for a single service orchestration. Now, a composed VPN can be classified into three categories based on the domain-specific VPN types. The interworking option may vary depending on the interdomain technology, such as IP or MPLS forwarding. So the composed VPN can be composed out of one domain is layer 2 VPN, a second domain in the middle is a layer 2 VPN, and another domain layer 3 VPN. Of course, there can be multiple domains in the middle. The interworking option is option A. And the other options are described here. It's like if the middle is all layer 3, then it is option A, B, and C. And if it's all L2 VPN, again, it can be used in option A, B, and C. We updated the data model to be in line with the layer 3SM and layer 2SM, and added the security and cross support based on the interworking option. And we took it out so it would be similar to the ones that we have in L3SM and L2SM. So these are the major changes we had from the previous version of the document. Any questions, comments? People read this?
Who's read this draft? A few, a couple, well, a few. Any comments to the mic? So what, you didn't have any next steps. What are your...
I have a next slide. I mean, since we already, like I said, we already had some service provider, and one of them is a co-author of this document, so we wanted to move it forward, this work.
Any comments? For me, I think we probably want to see some more comments on list, because I don't think enough people here in the room have read it to say if it's ready for adoption at this point.
Okay, so please review this so we can
Yes.
have comment and to make it okay for everyone to adopt it. So
Yeah, I do appreciate, based on the comments you received last time, that you updated to clarify the domain, the applicability. I know that was a serious concern that this was talking about multiple service providers in a way that probably wouldn't be implementable. But I would like to see what, especially operators, to weigh in to say that this is valuable, because I think seeing that interest would say that this work is something that the working group
proceed. In general, for those of you who have read it, who thinks that this work is valuable? And so I, again, would like to see, we didn't see many hands go up there, so I would like to see more input on the list.
Okay, this Robin from Huawei, because this is related with the VPN, so my suggestion is better that you can send this publish to the this the best working group or propose this in the RTD WG for the presentation. It can trigger more discussion, solicit more comments.
Okay.
Because I think there maybe has a better expertise on this one.
That's probably a fair comment to cross present this in the routing area.
Okay.
To BESS, I think you were suggesting, but where there might be more protocol specific, so maybe not on the necessarily on the operational side, but definitely more protocol specific to make sure that from a technical standpoint and maybe even from a need and standpoint that their voices get heard. And
Okay,
they can
so I'll
comment
first
as
send
well.
an email to the best mailing list, giving attention that we have this document, and if they can look at it also before, I'll do that.
And one additional question. If I recall right, BESS already have many VPN models,
yes.
Right? So what's the relationship between your model and the BESS model?
This model is specific for a composed VPN that is composed of multiple segmented VPN.
But you also have the segment VPN, right?
Yeah, but the segment VPN is just a description, and that's why I said that's the thing we said, that's why we try to align them with the layer 3 SM and layer 2 SM data model. So it's a composed. The way I didn't try to describe the architecture, but basically we have a composed VPN that's composed from segment VPN, and each segment VPN can be a layer 3 or a layer 2.
So I just want to clarify this. It's the segment VPN is a kind of a container, or it's a higher level abstraction.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Qing from Huawei. I think a key difference actually is one is service layer model. The other is network element model. So that's a key difference. And you need to mapping the service model into the we call the protocol model or network element model. So that's a key difference.
Okay.
We don't have this slide. Okay.
Thank you. So I think that's Chin. Did I? Yeah, you're right. I think I've got the order right there, and I may have messed up the slide tab load order, or I forgot to. Yep. Yep. No, I'll bring up the network slicing documents real quick here. Sorry about that. Just when I thought I had time made up. I apologize, Sunsuke.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Shinsuke Homa from NTT. I will talk about network slicing provision models. And this is new draft, and it's first time to present it. So I will talk about background and overview of the contents of this draft. Noted that this draft is independent one because network slices will related to several layers not only operation but also data plane. So it's independent draft. Okay. So as you know, network slicing is a hot topic, and several SDO are discussing. So there are several factors. For example, diversity of devices and services with communication, or improvement network flexibility provided by network virtualization technologies such as NFV and SDN. Also, network slicing is a fundamental concept of 5G, and 5G will be launched soon. So in 5G, ITU and 3GPP defined the three types communications as features of 5G: EMBB, MTC, and URLC. And network slices appears on this context, but we would like to aim make slicing concept more general, including fixed or data center networks. Then there are some problems on network slicing. As you know, network slicing is buzzword, and the definition is ambiguous. For example, some SDO says a slice is just VPN, or another says slice is VNF and service chaining. Also, the range where slice is provided is not strict defined. For example, 3GPP is discussing how to create slices on the 5G core network. Also, the use case of slices is unclear, and I think it's a problem. For example, slice will be used for enriching operators' service plans, or it is used for providing dedicated logical network service, logical network to tenants. So we need to clarify these definitions and use cases. So in the following two slides, I will talk about the scope of this work and purpose of this draft. So we would like to aim to use slicing to provide sweet spot for each services, like this figure. So not only edge of triangle. If we can realize this, tenants can use appropriate resources depending on their requirements, and use the network resources as their own services. And purposes on this draft, we have two mainly purposes on this draft. So first is defining resource types, structuring network slices, and stakeholders and their roles in network slice as a service model. They will be fundamental reference for individual internet draft related to network slicing. Also, we would like to clarify a capability which will be required by tenants. So in the few slides, I will introduce the overview of content of this draft. So we clarify the resource types. We assume that there are resource types could be categorized into three types. So network, first is network or one resource expressed as connectivity, such as link, node, or data plane protocols. Second is computing or NFVI resources expressed as CPU, memory, storage, etc. And third is functionality resources. It includes value-added service functions or optional control function. Also, in the network slicing, both of virtual and physical resources should be integrated. And we described basic structure of network slicing like this figure with referring TMF and CZPP model. So network slice subnet instance is established in each domain, and connecting this NSSI end-to-end network slice instance will be created. Also, NSI may be multi-level structure. So creation patterns, it is one of main contents of this draft. So we assume that there are 3 types of creation patterns. First is ready-made pattern. In this ready-made, so network slice provider create catalogs in advance, and tenants select and use one of which is close to their demand. Second is custom-made. This model is that network slice provider design network slice catalog on depending on requirements from tenants. And third is semi-custom model, and this is a hybrid of ready-made and custom-made. So NS provider creates an outline of catalogs, and tenants input several parameters depending on their service requirements. Provision models, this is also one of main content of this draft. So we assume that there are 3 models on slice provision. So first is SaaS-like model. In this model, tenant requests their request to create slice on their requirements, and in this model, tenant can control network slice depends on abstracted information, such as connectivity, application, and their attribution. Second is a path-like model. In this model, tenant control network slice as virtual resources, like middle of this figure. And third is IaaS-like model. In this model, tenants can control infrastructure resources directly. We assume that capability will be required by tenant will vary depending on these models. And this clarification will be useful on network slicing. So lastly, I will talk about next steps on this draft. So this is new draft. So we have very few comments and review. So we will welcome your review, further review. Especially, we would like to know opinion from particular customers. Also, we would like to map provision models and controllable resources described the provision models. Also, if needed, we would like to expand current YAM model for network slices. Thank you very much.
Questions? So I have one. It's an interesting read. Where else have you presented this? I mean, I'm not certain that, I could be wrong, I'm not certain that Ops Area Working Group, that people in here have, just like some of the other models, have some of the domain experience you need, especially since where you're looking for feedback and review. Where else have you, or where else are you considering presenting this to get more eyes, more people looking at this, more comments? Are you, for example, like 3GPP? I mean, what? Yeah.
I don't want to create a different definition from 3GPP or other SEO. So we need a unified definition.
Sure. Have you been talking to?
Yeah.
Okay. Question at the mic?
Yeah, Liang from China Mobile. I'm glad that you bring this back to IETF again, but I'm not sure if you know that all of these has been discussed 2 years ago in Prague and also more recently in London. I'm just confused, so confused because, you know, if you're doing the information model, then there is a draft on the, maybe it's expired or something, but you can find it. And, and the definition there, if you look at the buff, last buff, the comms buff, everything on there.
Yeah. I'm also proponent of comms, so I think the problem was definition will vary for each proponent. So we need to clarify the complete definition which required for slicing. So we made this draft. So if you have any opinions, so please let us know.
So this draft is named with models. So what's it relationship? What's it relates to model? It's an information model or provider data model?
No, it's different.
So why it's named with model?
This model means like patterns.
If I may try to clarify, Laurent Chavalia, I'm co-author of the draft. I think the notion of model here is provisioning models, as Shunsuke mentioned, with ready-made slicing, custom-made slicing. So to have a way for a tenant, a customer, to be able to consume slices in a very, packaged way to some extent. So this is the aspect of provisioning models. And I would like to make just two following comments. One, to address the question from Joe, where else it's been discussed or presented. Were you also asking in IETF scope or not? Because this will be, I think, presented also in the routing working group on Friday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's the first time we present this work in this form. So for Ops was a potential good group. Routing will be a second target. Okay. And to come back maybe to the previous question and the, I think at least my view for this work, why we think maybe in Ops it will be relevant is there have been several drafts on layer 2 service model, layer 3 service models, also some service automation draft trying to combine different use of Yang models at different layers or levels. I think this is a bit in the same spirit, trying to come with a request, customer, how they want like to consume a service or a slice package as a service, and what will be required in terms of how you bring the different things together at the different underlying levels. So a bit similar to L2, L3 service model, but like a slice service model to be consumed. This is my partial view, partial understanding, but maybe to put some thing in the discussion.
Yeah.
So again, Liang from China Mobile, just to remind you that the previous bout was held in Ops area. I would like this work to be done in IETF, but we have a pre-conclusion that this is not the right work to do here. But I would be the first person to raise my hand here to continue this work, but here's our AD.
So Ignas Bogdanas, which way should I face now? Because I would like to try to address the whole of the audience here. Yes, we had quite spectacular discussions about network slicing for many times, and the conclusion of the whole of the community was that this is not necessary. The initially formulated problem of network slicing was not a problem for IETF to solve. IETF has taken certain fragments of that, especially in a data plane. You have VPN plus, you have some other derivatives of that, and that work happily continues in the routing area. Now, I actually have read this document, and my interpretation of that is that your intentions are more of how do you take the components which are already existing somewhere, which you can call what builds network slicing, out of what network slicing is implemented, and how do you orchestrate those? And probably that's a right scope of work for IETF to try to do.
Yep.
Does that answer your concern? Was it yes or no?
Well, personally, I think there are some work in terms of cross-domain VPN. We can call it cross-domain VPN or slice. Slicing is a commercialized word.
Yes.
You know, I mean, slicing is slicing. So, yeah, if it is, I would like to see more, you know, usable tools being developed or models developed here in IETF for cross-domain VPNs. That would be very helpful. I don't care if it's called network slicing or not. That's basically for me.
And I think we are in full agreement on this. Yes.
Yeah.
Not on this discussion, but I don't know if the chair will continue on that. What will be your view for this work to continue here? Should we come again, present with different, taking into account the comments, or do you think it's not here that we should come again? Maybe it's too early, but just wanting to reach.
So, my opinion, Chandran might think differently. Given that it seems like there were very few people who read it, some comments or very few comments, I would say very much like the previous presentation, there's probably more eyes to be looked at maybe in routing, and maybe after more comments, more people look at this and more to the, I think, 2 slides back, the next steps about creating the models, maybe more about when, like we saw with the previous presentation on the composed VPN, once those Yang models get crystallized, then maybe this is the right working or at least the right area to do that in. Until then, I don't know that we have the right expertise to weigh in on this. Just given the comment or the lack of comments, I haven't seen much on the list either on this. But if there is interest, I would say bring that in. But I think I'd like to see some of these next steps done before it fits more into the ops area.
I agree with Joe, and I think Opsawg working group could be the right home for this work. But I think you need to discuss in the mail list to get more comments.
Yeah.
And interest. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, Chin. Nope. There. Oh,
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Qing Wu from Huawei. I'm here actually to discuss framework for automation, automated service and management with Yang. Actually, in lunch host speech, actually, we already hear the telemetry discussion, and it's more about actually bottom-up approach here. What I'd like to discuss is top-down service delivery with Yang. So it's more relevant to the host speaker discussion. So what a problem we really like to solve actually. Today we see a large number of Yang data model has been developed or underdeveloped by the IETF recently we see many of them get published, mature enough. So how can we piece this model together, put the model together to configure the device, create a service? It's not clear to everybody. Secondly, when operator began to deploy some of the model, the big challenge faced by the operator is how do we select the IETF-defined model to fit their use cases? Currently, IETF-defined model actually are distributed in different protocol working groups. It's hard to keep track of the maturity of the IETF-defined model. So this is some issue we really want to tackle. And so here the goal of this work is to define a framework to tell the developer, implementer, and operator how to implement the IETF-defined models, give some guidance, provide some reference framework for IETF-defined model list, and to instruct how to use IETF-defined model. If we have time, we want to actually give 1 or 2 use cases to explain how to leverage the component we define in the framework to automate the network and automate the service management. And actually, before we get to the status of the IETF-defined model, we want to introduce 2 concepts. The first is data model layering, and second is data model representation. Data model layering, actually, we can abstract network infrastructure from the bottom. Also, we can abstract the business needs or service requirements from the top. So we can, split the young data model into service model and network element model. Service model will focus on the, define what a service is, what a customer needs is. And for network element model, they can, can be used to get a network set up, program the network to realize the service. So, but here in this work, we really actually introduce another layer we call the network resource model. Typical example is network topology model or tunnel model. And to make analogy to explain the data model representation, we make an analogy to the house building process. Actually, for the customer, they order the house. Actually, they may order a house with 3 rooms, 1 living room, 1 bedroom, 1 kitchen. Actually, they may want to have a living room with 3 windows, and all of these requirements can be reflected into the house building blueprint. This house building blueprint actually can be compared to the service model. So the service model can be used by the customer to communicate their requirements, their business needs. And when the customer actually, the blueprint get approved by the customer or authority, asset authority, they can put it into the production. They can actually clear the site. They can establish the trench for the water supply, electric supply. And this water supply, electric supply can be compared with the network resource model. So we think that this network resource model is very crucial because really you can schedule resource to meet the customer needs. In addition, you can schedule resource to adapt to the network changes. For the house building, you can lay the foundation, you can build the different room in the house. All of these building blocks can be compared to the device model. So actually, one opposition we have here is we think IETF define many policy-related model like ACL, like a routing policy, but for some generic policy or some other policy, it seems to make very slow progress. But we think the policy model is very crucial because they can glue different models together, whether it is a service layer or network layer or device layer. They can really automate the network. So here is the status update of the IETF NetConf Young work. Actually, thanks for the design team set up by the different protocol working group, Young Doctor team, and Young Catalog team, and Young Coordination team. And we already make a good progress. Right now, we have rough statistics, maybe subject to change. We have more than 50 Opsawg get published. We have more than 80 working group jobs get working in progress. We still have another maybe 80 individual jobs actually that need to be proceeded. And we also see actually for management plan protocol like NetConf, RESTConf, Young Push, and MDA, recently also make a very good progress. So this actually benefit from open source community, like open config. They have a lot of input. Their innovation actually really inspire IETF to try to standardize this kind of work. So we think that this should be synergies and should continue to do. Also, we see IETF already have some good collaboration with other SDO like 3GPP, BBF, RCHB, MEF on many different layer models. Maybe there's still some problem between the SDO, but we think we should encourage more coordination between the SDO to align with each other rather than we build a different silo that will make mess. So this is the overview IETF defined model. We have service layer model. We have network model. We call the network resource model. This actually is a common building block. You can, for example, network topology model or network tunnel model. You can leverage IETF defined mechanism like a scale amount actually to compose this model to help to automate the network management. So it's very crucial. For device net model, it actually have fully coverage different technology, like a transport technology, routing technology, OM technology, performance management technology. So here we also have some observation actually to deliver some service. Actually, you really need to standardize like a BGP model, VPN model. The VPN model, I mean here actually is network element, the VPN model. But we think actually for some reason process issue or human resource issue actually they make a very slow progress. So that actually make a get a risk to really how to for operator they build their project based on use cases. Actually for some model is not ready. Actually that's a big issue. So we really hope actually IETF defined model could be the use case driven, and we can keep track of this IETF defined model maturity. Actually, I think Young Catalog is a very good tools actually. And right now we here also make a very good progress. Young Catalog has already migrated to the IETF repository for maintenance. So this could be a very powerful tool, but I think that is not enough. Here actually I want to compare the difference between the traditional service delivery and the model-driven service delivery. For the traditional service delivery, the big problem is actually the OSS/BS actually, they couple the service definition with how the service is realized. That actually causes you may build a lot of OSS/BSS application, build a lot of silo over years. Actually, they lack standard interface to communicate between the customer and operator. Actually, this actually lack a good service agility. Also, for some protocol operation, the create, delete, or modify, this process will repeat in many various different process. So to address this, we can introduce a model-driven approach. Actually, to address it, we can define a standard interface, standard model. We can use the service model to describe the service requirements. So my idea for the model-driven approach, you really need to decouple the service definition from how service is realized. So the management system can be split into two systems. One is we call the service activation provision system. The second is service enforcement system. That will allow you to do the more service innovation. You introduce a new service, but the service enforcement system doesn't need to be changed. It doesn't need to be upgraded. You just need to actually upgrade the service activation provision system. So that will help to drive more service innovation to support service agility. So what is the management automation? So we can actually introduce a two-layer management automation. We have service layer management automation. Actually, we can use like a L3 VPN service model. We call the top-down service delivery model to describe the customer needs, the service requirements to get a network set up. But this is not enough. In some cases, you also need to provide a service assurance, service monitoring. So what you can do actually to leverage young push notification, the telemetry mechanism to actually report the network performance information to the customer operator. So one way you should do actually should bind the service with the network topology or tunnel, and you can report the tunnel performance or network topology performance or VPN performance to the customer or to the operator. They can manipulate this kind of performance data. They can re-optimize the network. So you really can build the closed loop service management. So for the network management is very similar. Actually, you can also leverage the YAM push notification. You can subscribe the data you are interested in and allow the device to distribute the data in real time or continuously, actually. And also, we really want to have the like a policy engine. They can use like a network policy model. Actually, they can glue the telemetry data with the provision data. So you also can build the closed loop management automation. So we have the service management automation. We also have network management automation. So we really need to hook them together. So how to hook them together? We can introduce this service mapping. In RP service scenario, actually, we can map the service requirements defined in the VPN into the BGP configuration parameter, MPLS parameter that can enable the that can configure PE, enable the BGP or ACL queues. And also we have some other scenario. We have T scenario. You really want to provide the traffic engineer support. You can map actually we call the virtual network service parameter into the T tunnel parameter or T topology parameter we list here. Key takeaway here, actually, I think the current problem is IETF, process slow. For some model, we really, we need to pay more attention to some of the model, like a BGP model or policy-related model or queues-related model. I think it's crucial to have to deliver the VPN-related service. So the second, actually, we think the current IETF-defined model is not is distributing different protocol working, which is hard to keep track of their maturity. So we really want to leverage some of the tools like YAM catalog. Also, it would be great actually to get operator together, establish the operator community or design team to really have a champion to help to review this IETF-defined model, identify some bugs or an implementation issue, feedback to the IETF. That will be really help IETF to make this YAM data model more useful. So what we really like to do is should be the YAM IETF YAM model standardization should be the use case driven or project driven. We can prioritize some of these models that can fit the customer needs. And in addition, we think in this work actually we define a framework we call the top-down service delivery that can be leverages the model defined the IETF. Actually, we can provide the reference framework for operator, for developer or implementer to see how to implement IETF defined model. So last, we want to call for operator to help deploy this model, implement this model, and that's what I want to discuss here.
Zheng Bin from Huawei. In fact, I still remember, I forget, but 2 or 3 years ago, I talked about this, when Ignor's talk about this, the progress of this, the YAM model in IETF. So that time I proposed several of this, the proposal. I think this, the presentation, to some extent is aligned with this, the proposal. I want to know some this. I want to know some this the answers about such a question. The first one, I wonder the mailing list for the YAM model is still exist or not in the IETF, because at that time we have the YAM mailing list to discuss the YAM model design. I'm not sure this mailing list is still here or not.
Right now, YAM architecture design team in routing area has already been closed down, and YAM coordination design team already closed down. And but for some young model, I think they actually go back to the normal process. They already have many needs in different protocol working group. So really, we how to drive this work is just use the manage in different protocol working group to drive this. We don't have dedicated young young design team or young managist right now.
Okay, from my point of view, I think the coordination work still is necessary, because here we try to propose the user cases to indicate what young model should be, what the southbound young model should be necessary to be defined as early as possible. So, but this is the young model for specific surface may be distributed in the different working group. So I suggest, if possible, we can initiate some of this the coordination mailing list, or try to utilize the GitHub to coordinate this the work. That's my suggestion. The second one, I want to know that the presentation is only to this time is only be presented in the OPS WG, or maybe other?
The answer is we already present this topic in ITGWG on Wednesday morning and get a lot of feedback and a lot of discussion. So here we just represent in OPSWG to get more feedback.
Okay, I think that is very useful. And also that's I wonder that because I not go through review this draft, because here I show some of the picture about this the layers theory model, and also you have some of this the picture show the list of this the model for specific surface. I'm not sure. For you, can you go?
So I hate to, but we're going to run out of time. So this is already over time, and we've got two more presentations. So I have a review as well. I'll send to the list, but I think we need to move on. I'm sorry to cut the mic at this point, but if we don't, we're going to run out of time.
Okay, I just say quickly, I hope this can also be shown in the draft. Okay, that's me.
Thanks. Sorry, yeah, we're going to have to cut the mic. Take it. Please go to the list.
Okay.
Thank you, Jen. I'll send a review. And we have Yunnan. This is technically our last Ops AWG presentation. We have Sean Turner after this that was brought in by Warren for Ops area, but that'll kind of just roll into this, I think. 10 minutes, please.
Hi, everyone. This is Yunnan Gu from Huawei. So today I'm going to discuss the draft that identifies use cases for control plane telemetry. So here we use the term network-wide protocol monitoring to refer to the control plane telemetry. Okay. So similar control plane telemetry, similar to management plane and data plane. What it does is it monitors and analyzes data that collects from different planes, but there are also differences, and the major difference relies on specific use cases. And for the control plane, there are basically two type of applications or use cases that we think are useful. The first one is network troubleshooting. So here's a statistic figure that shows a very large percent of the network issues are caused by protocol failures. So having the protocol monitoring and analysis will be benefit for network troubleshooting. And the second category is network planning. So for example, you want to optimize a route path, or you want to set up a new tunnel, and then with some detailed route information, you can have better centralized or distributed calculations. And then also there's a very hot, I think, very hot concern or topic that rise from operators and also OTTs. They're concerned about root policy validation, and so it's just not simply monitoring of the root policy. The separation of root policy processing from the root attributes does not solve the validation problem. So we need more information and analysis to achieve that. And finally, for some long-term or short-term network design optimization, there requires the what-if simulation works. So to the best of my knowledge, currently most simulation works are based on the the configuration profiles collected from devices. So that's not 100% recovery of the ongoing network. So there requires more more practical or better recovery of the ongoing network to achieve better what-if simulation results. Okay, and so we'll discuss just 2 use cases. But before that, I'd like to clarify a little bit about the problem space that is discussed in this draft. So starting from the data source generation, we'll first discuss what type of data are collected, are required, and besides from that, what devices needs to be monitored. Some applications requires data just from like single devices, but some others require network-wide monitoring. And then once we have the data, we'll discuss the data modeling, encapsulation, whatever, and also subscription. Okay, so here the data processing efficiency will be considered, and then that comes to data transportation. Also, the transportation efficiency should be considered, and in this part, it comes to the protocol selection, whether we should use the existing ones such as BMP, gRPC, netconf, BGP link state, or should we invent new ones? That also should be discussed. And finally comes to the data analysis. This is most connected to the use cases. So for different applications, the requirement of data synchronization and the data path efficiency are different. So, well, as a whole picture, these problems are discussed in this drafts. And so next, let's look at 2 examples.
5 minutes, please.
Okay, sure. The first one is the LSDB synchronization failure. In some cases, the 2 devices fail to synchronize their LSDB. It could be caused by the LSP authentication error or the excessive size of LSP. And sometimes within your devices, you have the logs or diagnosed results that can be exported to the network manager or the controller. But in cases such as when you have a software or a hardware box, the device itself, it does not diagnose such things. So at this time, you will need to do the comparison between the local LSDB and also the received and received and sent LSPs to localize where exactly the issue lies and then do further analysis. Okay. So the second use case here is the root policy validation. Well, here, as I just mentioned, the pure collection of root policy is not very helpful in here. So it might be helpful to be able to record the root policy processing in correlation with the root change. Okay, as the example shown in the right part, if we can record which exact root policy is changing which exact root attribute, then and then with such visualization, the operators are able to do validation or troubleshooting and root cause analysis and such things. And from another perspective is that also I mentioned is the simulation tool. So what if we can have a high performance control plane snapshot that recovers the ongoing network? Then the simulation results will be more accurate and effective. Okay, so more use cases can be found in the draft. And here are two general requirements that we summarized from the use cases we listed. The first one is that we need to have a tunnel. This tunnel is should be able to guarantee the performance of data generation from generation to exportation to be able to meet different applications. And the second thing is the data types should be sufficient to meet various applications. Okay, so well, and this is of course informational draft, and what we want to do as a first step is to identify the use cases that operators, OTDs, they truly are concerned about. And so please provide your comments if these use cases are useful or not, and if you have other more valuable use cases, please give us feedbacks. And then once we have refined the use cases, we can work on the gap analysis and then other things. Yes, that's it for the presentation. Comments?
Thank you, Yanan. Any comments, please? Since we're running, I'd really appreciate you finishing in exactly 10 minutes. That was great. Any comments to the list? I do have a review that I will I'll send out to the list. I really appreciate the presentation. Thank you. Sean, can you take us home? And this again is, I hate to, I'm sorry, Warren and Ignace, to kind of do this, but this is ops area. Starting now, we have our ADs, Ignace Bogdanos, Warren Kumari, and I'm going full screen and giving Sean control.
Hi, testing, eat it, all right. Hey, my name's Sean Turner. This presentation is not like the others. The high-level bits here are, this is a MIB, and I'm not going to ask for working group adoption. I'm sitting here looking at Benoit, who was my co-AD at the time, yang, MIB. Okay. And thank you very much for allowing me to stay and talk here, because I sent this presentation at like noon. And thank you for staying late. I'll go quick because between you and dinner. Why am I here? So the first time I ever came, I talked about this, I think it was actually in Prague the last time. And so I remember walking up to Warren and some others and saying, so I got this MIB. And they all said, well, you got to go Yang. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll see how that goes. But it's still a MIB. It's not Yang, which is why I think it wouldn't really fly here in the IETF. It's going to be informational. The reason why it says standards track in the tools thing and on the GitHub repo is because that's the one I use, the format template I use. So I'm going to change it. The OIDs that I'm going to end up using in the MIB actually aren't the SMI OIDs, which are the OIDs that are used out of the IETF, the IETF ARC. I'm going to use some MIBs from some OIDs from some other crazy thing. And it's for cryptographic modules. So it's got all kinds of things in there that like don't really apply to the IETF. So we do have some asymmetric key and symmetric key stuff that's pretty common to use, and some trust anchor stuff. But the trust anchor protocol that's defined that this thing is can manage isn't really used anywhere. There's firmware stuff. There is firmware, but it's based on RFC 4108, which probably really isn't going to get used. And then there's all kinds of things like security policies, which, classification levels and things, which really pretty much aren't used anywhere else in the IETF generally. Again, did I mention it's not Yang? It's also got some pretty non-internet concepts. We're in the ops area. One of the things is to zeroize. You have a box. You don't want somebody to have it because you maybe think you've lost control. So what do? You brick it so they can't walk off with it. It does nothing. It's a great concept. It doesn't really fly with ops. Security policies and classifications. The security world, they have tried and tried. They got it in the IP protocol, and not many people use it. And getting it to be used anywhere else in messaging and that kind of stuff doesn't really fly. It's got some specialized stuff for like compromised key lists because, CRLs, they're just too large. We'll just list the keys. Now, Kent Watson has a draft that's in netconf, which is for certs, right? And that's great, but, why stop there? There's hundreds of knobs you can turn on a certificate path. So let's list them all. Oh yeah, did I mention this MIB is 123 pages? There's 6 or 7 different modules. There's this PAL thing, which, is kind of new from this ESD extensions things. I mentioned firmware. It's RFC 4108 that nobody really uses. There's Trust Anchor Management Protocol, which got done in the security world and pretty much not a lot of people implement. And I could actually go on. So what am I hoping for? Well, since Warren's up here, maybe I can get a pony. But if I can't get that, basically what I'm hoping for you guys to say is, these are not the droids we're looking for. If you go to the ISE and ask for an informational draft that is about this topic, then you would never implement. Like if I were to come here and say, please adopt this thing, and I had to get you to agree to support all those things, I'd be here forever, and probably all the draft would get clipped out. So when I want to go to the ISE, I'm going to do full, open kimono, truth in advertising, that like this is an internet draft. It's going to be informational. It's going to go through the ISE. They'll probably make me put some other kind of disclaimers on the front of it in the whole 9 yards. I will talk to Kent to make sure I'm not ruffling his feathers because I already did. And so I'm basically hoping for no one to get to the microphone and say, I absolutely want this working group to adopt this draft.
So yeah, we basically asked Sean if he had mind coming along and just presenting it just so that nobody was surprised when this goes to the ISE and says, oh my God, I wish you'd worked on it here.
Yeah, because if you've never gone to the ISE, one of the questions he asks is, so where did you talk about this? And so you tell him, and if you say nowhere, then he's concerned there's going to be an end run. Because there's this thing called an RFC 5742 review, which the area directors will do. Maybe him, maybe the security guys, which I'll talk to too. I guess that's the other part I should add. There's MIBs and there's Yang modules, and I know you guys have tried to get them to write Yang modules and MIB modules for security protocols forever, and you get ignored. I'd get ignored too, because they've been laughing at me for 2 years over about this. So my hope basically is to just quietly move into the night, and that's really it.
Great. Nobody is objecting, so please take this work elsewhere.
Success.
Thank you. I'll let you drive. So this is largely, the ops area gave a bunch of our time. What? Oh, click on the button. There we go. So yeah, the ops area basically gave most of our time to Opsawg because we didn't have much that we thought needed to be on the agenda. So this is going to be the very, 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 very short Opsawg part. Mainly open mic so that people can come along and shout at us if you would like to. We're perfectly fine if you'd like to shout at us. We haven't been shouted at in a while. Anyone? Anyone? We're still clicking on the buttons. Whee! Here's the note wall again. You saw it a short while ago. Please make sure that you still know what it says. Oh, there we go.
And we actually have 2 topics on the agenda. One is some news from external area on registration procedures for interface types, and then the open mic. So Interior have asked us to simply share some information with the community on one of the documents which is being progressed there. It will be a AD-sponsored document, but it is being worked on and discussed in the Interior. It's about the procedure of and process how to request the interface type. If you're working on a new fancy tunneling mechanism which you think it deserves a new name for the tunnel interface, this is where you need to look at. And the overall, why this has surfaced, there was no such process before Yang days, and now Interior claims that the large portion of the requests for interface types comes from Ops area. Therefore, they would like to educate us a little bit on what the process will look like. The process overall is very simple. There's a registry. If you want to name your interface and the name already appears in the registry, well, you're out of luck. If the name is not taken, there's a procedure to be followed, how to reserve that name for your particular interface type. And that's it. And if you're interested in a discussion, that is happening in the interior mailing list.
Great. That's the conclusion of this. We ran a few minutes over time. There's open mic if you would like to shout at us, or you can do that in person. Please sign the blue sheets. Do not forget to sign the blue sheets. Who has not signed the blue sheets? Okay then. Thank you, everybody. And I'm glad that we had a full OpsAWG part. And I'm okay with the fact that Ops area was short. See you all in Montreal.
Yep, thank you.